Hello, my beautiful weirdos. Welcome to my podcast. Yes, you read the title right. This is the Hi, Yes I Am podcast. I'm bringing it back officially on YouTube, video format. I'm doing it. I've made the decision. It's happening. And here we are. I started this podcast like 2 or 3 years ago. The episodes are probably still up on Spotify. If you use Spotify, my name at the time was Emerald City Witch, so it might be under that. If you want to go check out some of my older, very unique way of doing a podcast, where it's, at the time it was, hey, let me get stoned and talk about funny stuff, but now it's like, hey, I'm kind of stoned, I guess, and we're just going to talk about whatever I want. So for this first rebooting of Hi, Yes I Am, hello, hi, yes I am talking about religion. Yes, I know it's a hot button topic nowadays, especially in our current political climate. But you know what? I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings on religion and, spirituality and all of that. So let's get started. So before I get into the more serious adult conversations about religion and all that fun stuff, I wanted to tell the craziest stoner experience I had recently. And yes, it's very fitting for this podcast. So I recently had the craziest road tripping experience a couple weeks ago with my family. And so I am chronically ill. I have rheumatoid arthritis and, tremor disorder, and I have chronic migraines and all that fun stuff. So me and my family, it's me, my husband, and my 2 kids. We have our dog loaded up in the back. We're all making the 2-hour drive to go see the grandparents, right? And we're leaving it kind of at nighttime. It's probably around 6 o'clock in the evening. And I had a bad flare-up day. So I was like, let me just pop a goofy gummy. I can usually handle 100 milligrams. So that's what I did. We're on the road, right? It's nighttime. And we're driving down part of this highway that's construction, right? And of course, everybody's on the road right now when we're going through. And the gummy hits me at the worst time, okay? We're going down this part of the highway where it's construction and barriers on both sides. You've got a whisper of clearance on the shoulder for where these barriers are, right? There's a semi in front of us, a semi behind us, or beside us, and a semi behind us with a bunch of cars, right? The semi in front of us cannot pick a lane to save their life or anybody's life. Apparently, they are just weaving all over the road, and I get it. It's construction. It's nighttime. I can't remember if it was raining or not. I don't think it was, actually. But, so the semi in front of us, cannot stay in the lane. And I get it. I totally get it. You're a semi. Take up as much space as you want within reason. Just we're out of the way, right? I am having a panic attack. I'm I'm going to die. This is it. This is when I die. I'm going to have a heart attack right here, because it's I'm getting the worst feelings of claustrophobia, being my passenger princess self, just stoned out of my mind. Semis all around us. We're in construction. It's my worst nightmare. Okay. We're getting boxed in on all sides, and I'm just oh my God, I have no control over the situation, which is even worse for me as a Virgo. I'm like, I got this. Like, let me jump in. And I'm like, no, dude, you're fucking stoned out of your mind. What are you gonna do? You're gonna kill us. But then we hit a point where I didn't think we were ever getting out of this construction. It was taking so long. Like 5 minutes felt like 5 years, okay? And then I finally sobered up just enough to be like, oh yeah, my husband's driving. He's got this. And I was just like, boop, I was good. So anyways, I bet people out there can relate. Here, let me check my notes. So I wrote it all down so that I could remember. Let's see. Okay, we got boxed in by semis. Semi was not using a blinker and could not pick a lane at night. Husband was driving, kids, and the dog in the back seat. So yeah, I'm thinking like, I wrote down, I was having an out-of-body experience because I was like, this is it. I'm going to die. I'm going to die right here. My kids are in the back. My precious baby girl dog is in the back. Like, this is how I die in front of the ones I love the most. So anyways, stay in school and don't do drugs. On to the serious stuff. So I have a very complicated relationship with religion, Christianity to be specific. Like, growing up in America, growing up Southern Baptist, it wasn't really something that I could avoid. But it shaped a lot of who I am as a person today. And not all of it was bad. Some of it was really, really positive. But some of it took me a really long time to get over. Obviously, like the religious trauma and things about, growing up just being different. Like I kind of went along with, the routines and just like the little rituals and the practices. Like my childhood was like church on Sunday, church on Wednesday, like every little event, Bible school, vacation Bible school every summer, like church camp, like I volunteered, I worked in the nursery, like I taught like a class for a couple years at VBS, like Vacation Bible School when I got old enough. Like I was in it. Okay. Like I made so many friends through like going to church and going to like youth group and, doing like the fun events with like kids my age. And I met my husband through like church, I guess. It was like a church event, like before school started. And I gained a lot of life experience just socializing and being around people and, through my volunteering and through working in the nursery, like I gained a lot of good life experiences that I still keep with me and I still look back on. I have a lot of good memories just connecting with people and just developing relationships with people, even though now I look back on a lot of like the situations and the circumstances weren't really positive, like going to church and being basically indoctrinated, and just feeling like I believed, but like I didn't fit in. And like, even when I got to like middle school, like 7th, 8th, like getting into junior high and then high school, I started to realize that I thought a lot differently than, everybody around me, that went to church, that I went to church with, and like the families, and like my mom even like worked for the church that we were going to. Like, when we would move, we would just, join a new church and she would inevitably work there. And then when I got older, I would inevitably work there and volunteer. Like, it became a huge part of my identity, but also I was questioning a lot of things because I was hearing a lot of the teachings in like service, like, Sunday school and, during the like main church service, and then on Wednesdays and like youth group, and, the way it was like fluffed up for like kids to make it like this really fun, like we're learning life lessons about being a good person and God and Jesus and, all this stuff. But like, I didn't realize at the time that I was like a queer person until I was in high school. I realized, hey, I don't just like boys. Like, I like girls and like, I like whoever. Like, it's just vibes, like, I don't care what your gender, I don't care your expression, how you express yourself. Like, as long as you're a good person, like, I can find anybody attractive and develop a connection that way. But like, that was always taught to me as like a bad thing growing up. Like, it's male and female and husband and wife, and you gotta get married and have kids, and purity culture, and you have to look and speak and act just like us, kind of a thing. And even though I've distanced myself from that for the most part, I've come to a point now where I'm like very comfortable in my atheism because I'm spiritual in other ways. Like, I have gotten into podcasts a lot recently, and a lot of them have been like spiritual, like religious, or maybe even like political podcasts. But one of them I've really enjoyed. I don't know if it's like a podcast, but she has a YouTube channel called No Nonsense Spirituality. Her name's Britt Hartley. She basically calls herself a spiritual atheist. And I love that term because I don't have a God belief. I don't believe there's enough evidence to prove a God. I haven't been convinced that there is, like the stereotypical atheist beliefs that there is no God, right? But also, like, through her and some other people like Dan McClellan, I love him. He's a biblical scholar, and he breaks down like the historical and like linguistic and like cultural context of a lot of like the verses and like the Bible stories and things that I grew up hearing. But he puts it in a way that I absolutely love because I'm like a big history buff. Like, I love learning about like just human behavior and like the way that societies operate, and things like government and like jobs and healthcare, and the different religious practices and different taxation and all that fun stuff about history. Like, he frames the Bible from that point of view and breaks down and gets more in depth about verses and stories that, a lot of people just take at face value, and they don't really go into like the deeper meaning or like, what context of history was this written in, and what kind of, connections can we draw from that about maybe what the scriptures are actually trying to tell us. And so from that, I've been able to pretty confidently take some of the teachings of Jesus from this atheist standpoint of just, I love the message. I love the idea behind the message of just being a good person, and just not caring about if you're going to get anything in return, that kind of thing. So like, one of the things that I just couldn't get past when I was deconstructing was the teachings of Jesus, because I believe in that message so strongly of like, helping those in need and feeding the hungry and, providing resources to people that don't have them, like whether it be monetary or like clothes or, let me give you a place to stay, things like that. From a philosophy perspective, like Jesus was a pretty radical guy at the time. Like for the things that he was teaching and the ways he was speaking out against like the government and like the religious institutions, just the way that they were taking advantage of people, just being like, hey, what are you doing? Like, and especially the story of the parable of the Good Samaritan. Like, I love that story because I don't remember the specifics, but it's like, there was this unhoused person, whatever, down on their luck. Maybe they were like sick. I can't remember. But you had all these people just passing them by, like a rich person, like a religious person, or, just your average person. And they all ignored him. But then Jesus came along and was like, let me help you. Like, I don't care your situation. Like, I just want to care for you. Right? From like a human perspective, that's really impactful. Like, editor me here, I realized going over the footage that I was not completely wrong, but I was mistaken about some of the details of the Good Samaritan story. And I know that I didn't get a lot of the details right, but hopefully you guys understand what I'm trying to say. That's all. Jesus hung out with like the social outcasts of the time. Like, he hung out with lepers that were cast out of their towns. He hung out with, what's her name? Mary Magdalene, who was a prostitute. Like, his disciples were, anyways, you know what I'm trying to say. I'm not going to cut a lot of this because I want this to be genuine. I want this to be from the heart. So I'm going to try to be as precise, concise, whatever you want to call it with my words, but I'm just rambling, right? Isn't that kind of what a podcast is? You just ramble and talk about whatever you're talking about for that episode. But like, Jesus cared for people regardless of their circumstances, whether they were rich, whether they were poor, whether they were in good health, whether they were in bad health, whether they, were a criminal or, a righteous person. Like, he hung out with everybody. And he never really asked for anything in return except for to just pay it forward, to just, pass it on, do a kindness, be kind, love your neighbor, be like me, Editor me again. I realize it's been at least like 9 years since I've stepped foot inside of a church in order to like learn. And it's been even longer that I've picked up a Bible and read one, and I need to brush up on some of my Bible knowledge, because I feel like I just butchered a bunch of the stuff about Jesus. So I might actually go in and do like a separate episode specifically about the teachings of Jesus that I do like and that I think are really good life lessons to have. But again, you can tell how much I've lost as far as like my biblical knowledge about like Jesus and scripture. So please judge me all you want, but hold it against me or don't. I just wanted to throw that out there, that I've been, and I'm still actively deconstructing every day, but I've been pretty actively deconstructing since about 2016, 2017. So just wanted to throw that in there for everybody that's like eye rolling about all my biblical references that I'm getting wrong. It just came off the top of my dome how it did. And going back, I realized that I'm way out of touch with my biblical knowledge and my scripture knowledge and my Jesus knowledge. So I think I'm actually going to do a separate standalone episode just on Jesus and, those verses in the Bible. So anyways, back to the episode. So consulting my notes again. So I wrote, he was kind and asked for basically nothing in return, even when he knew, because biblical, Bible, Jesus, he knew in the stories that people would betray him, people would turn their backs on him. He knew his fate. He knew what was going to happen to him in the end. But he did all that stuff anyways. He helped all those people. He helped Judas, even though he knew he was going to betray him for money. He knew it. He knew what's his name was going to deny him 3 times and be like, I don't know, Jesus. I don't know what you're talking about. He knew that the people he cared about, his disciples, would betray him and turn their backs on him. But he was kind to them anyways. And so that's the philosophy that I can get behind. Is just be a good fucking person. If you can help out, It costs nothing to be kind. But it can be very expensive to be hateful. Just ask racists and, bigots. It's very expensive. So even though I will never, I'm pretty convinced that in this moment, 2025, that I will never believe, I will never be convinced of the existence of a God, of a higher power, of a divine being. And I will never go back to organized religion, but I will always be spiritual in some way, whether it's just honoring nature and just, saying a thank you out into the universe. Thank you for, planet Earth, the home we live on. Thank you for the trees. Thank you for the animals. Thank you for the water. Thank you for the food and, the sunlight and the moon, all the woo-woo spiritual stuff. Because I did dabble in a little bit of witchcraft and I still kind of am witchy, spiritual, atheist, But even though I will never believe in the existence of God, of a divine creator, I will always be spiritual in the way that I just believe in just giving back and just paying it forward and being a good person, taking care of my fellow humans, my fellow mammals and other earthly inhabitants and the animals and the fish and the birds and, helping to take care of the earth itself, the planet, keeping the water clean and the air clean and, as much as we can. Because anyways, you know what I'm saying. So there's that fun stuff about that. If you want some more recommendations for, if you're kind of along the same lines as me, maybe you're just starting your deconstruction journey, maybe you're a Christian watching this and just being like, wow, that's really stupid. Spiritual atheism, that doesn't even make sense. I highly, highly recommend checking out No Nonsense Spirituality Britt Hartley, she has a YouTube. She has a book that she's written of the same title. She has a website. There's also Dan McClellan, the biblical scholar. He has a YouTube channel, Dan McClellan, but he also has a podcast, Data Over Dogma, with this other guy named Dan Beecher, which I've never heard of him before, but I'm definitely going to look into him. But the person that has inspired me the most recently, especially in this stage of my deconstruction, is the creator Monte Mader. I love everything about her. Her story is so inspiring. She has a podcast called Flipping Tables that's on YouTube. You can find her on Instagram, TikTok. I'm sure other places. She goes on other people's podcasts. But her story is so inspiring, Monty's, because she grew up heavy Christian nationalist. Just a little bit of her story that I can remember off the top of my head. She grew up very heavily Christian nationalism. Her and her family stockpiled weapons to fight against the government coming for them for their religious beliefs. Very heavy into purity culture, blurring the lines into some, racism and those kinds of teachings. You'll have to check her out. If you're interested in any of what I've been talking about so far, she is a great, great, great resource because she came out of the thick of it. She fought her way out, and so did Britt Hartley. Her story is pretty inspiring too. I won't get into a whole lot of that because there are some, trigger warnings associated with that. If you want to check out her stuff, she goes into a lot of heavy topics like nihilism and unaliving, self-unaliving, things of that nature. But yeah, so that's my talk about religion. I'm so done trying to be inauthentic. I didn't film for a while. I stopped filming content because I got so self-conscious of the way that I look. I've been trying to do my makeup more, and I was just like, oh, I haven't showered. I haven't done my makeup. I don't have a cute outfit. I'm not perfect. But who freaking cares? Look at my lighting. Do you think this lighting is perfect? No. Do you think my camera quality is perfect? No. Do you think my audio quality is perfect? No. Nobody's perfect. And you can let me know in the comments if this is true for you anyways. I definitely have been leaning more towards this too once I heard about it, that what people are craving right now is just people being real and being authentic, messy hair, no makeup. Who cares if you've worn the same outfit for 3 days? Who cares if you haven't showered in a couple days? Maybe you haven't brushed your teeth that day. Maybe you're a little bit on the heavier side and you've got your rolls showing. Who cares? I'm not wearing a bra right now. Can you tell? But yeah, I'm trying not to let imposter syndrome kind of take over, because I've also heard recently, I think it was a really funny connection to Smosh that I just love so much. I think it was on their podcast, Smosh Mouth, where, no, maybe it wasn't. I don't remember. Somebody was saying that being able to feel imposter syndrome is almost like a privilege, because you've already kind of achieved it in a way. I can't remember. If I can find it, I'll leave something in the comments maybe, or in the description. But anyways, I'm going to wrap up this episode for now. I had some other topics I wanted to talk about, and you guys can let me know in the comments if you want me to talk about them next time. But I have some stuff about parenting in America in 2025. And I live in a red state. I live in Oklahoma, so that's unique and special for me. I was going to talk about gentle parenting and some of kind of like almost like the stigmas around saying you're a gentle parent. I was going to talk about some things about like the controversial things I do with like my kids. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought of this episode. For my first episode back, rebooting. Hi, yes I am. So maybe this episode will be titled, Hi, yes I am, ... a spiritual atheist. So yeah, anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode and listening to me ramble. I'm going to carry over my outro from my OK Miller videos. I hope you have a good rest of your day, your week, your month, your year, your morning, your afternoon, your evening, whenever you are watching this. And I'm OK Miller. OK Miller out.